Hey viewers, my name's Kara. I'm your host for Tuesdays on the Pagan Perspective, and this month we're talking about all different things related to deity. This week we're talking about how we relate to the gods. This week's question is about how we talk about our relationship to deity. The questioner mentions hearing some Wiccans and witches talk about working with deity, while others talk about worshipping deity. And they've also heard some Norse pantheists and other pagans or other witches talk about viewing the gods as being kin to us, and therefore worship doesn't really feel appropriate. So knowing that there were a variety of different views on the channel, wanted us to talk about how we relate to the gods. Now, as you all probably know, if you've watched my videos for the past however many years, I do generally talk about working with deity. And that has always been something that I felt was appropriate to my path and the way that I work, because I do feel like whatever I do is in relationship to the gods. And if I want to accomplish something, then they sort of have to be on board with what I'm doing. They have to give me their blessing, and they have to be working with me on it. In other words, they would not be working against what I'm doing. So everything that I do, I view as working in conjunction with them and their will and what is for the good of all. I also just never really liked the term worship, because that's not how it felt to me. It did feel much more, not necessarily familial, but definitely familiar, where to me the connection is more personal. It's more on a level of obviously not being the same, because I am not deity, but knowing that there is that kind of element within all of us. As some paths will say, remember thou art God, remember thou art goddess, things like that. Knowing that that is an element of our existence. And there's actually a lot of really good stories about that my minister tells at my UU church that are from more monotheistic traditions. Stories about people coming into a monastery, I think is one of the stories, and telling them the Messiah is among you. And it changed the entire way that the people related to each other, because they were thinking, like, oh, he could be the Messiah, or she could be the Messiah, or I could be the Messiah. So people were treating each other and themselves with a much more profound respect, because they realized that any one of them really could be, and in a way was, this great thing. And so I do sort of feel that way about people. And one of my favorite proverbs is a Serbian proverb. You probably know it. Be humble, for you are made of earth. Be noble, for you are made of stars. And that is all kind of the same idea to me. So while I do view deity in the way that I think of it as representations and manifestations of the energy of the universe as being something different from what I am in this lifetime, I do also recognize that there's an element of that in me and in all people. And so worship never felt like the right word to me. However, in the past couple of years, I have become much more comfortable with the word worship, and I've begun to use it a little bit more, especially since I've started forming more personal connections with specific deity forms. So really, especially when I was only talking about general god, general goddess, working with felt like the better terminology to me. But when I start to work with specific aspects of deity, then the term worship does make a little bit more sense to me, because it's doing something specifically for them, doing something in devotion to them. And so in a way, I differentiate between when I'm praying just as a devotion, or when I'm doing a specific offering, that is a form of worship. And then when I'm doing spellcraft or doing ritual, and I am asking for their blessing on some kind of thing that I'm doing, then that becomes more of the working with aspect. So I kind of see them as both aspects of my path now, but sort of different in a way. So that's how I see the terms, that's why I use the different terms, and really it's not always easy to explain exactly why certain things feel a certain way, but I hope that that helped a little bit to understand a bit of my thought processes of why I use different terminology at different points. But I definitely did have to kind of come into being used to using the term worship again, and I don't know if that's because of the background that I came out of and my personal path being so different than what I was raised in that I didn't want to use the same terminology, or if it really just had to do with the associations that I have with the word worship, and I couldn't use those again comfortably until I had an element to my path that felt like worship, which was having personal connections with specific aspects of deity, which I did not have for the vast majority of the beginning of my path. So people who are always asking me about, like, hey, I'm starting out and I don't know what to do about what deities to choose, or, waiting for deity to choose me or whatever. A lot of people are really concerned with starting out their path having patron deities. I didn't. I practiced for about a decade without having any specific relationships with specific deity forms, and I was comfortable with that, and it worked well for me. And so I think some people may want to start with that, but if you don't feel the need to start with that, just know that not everyone does, and you don't necessarily have to, and whatever your path is meant to be, it'll come out whenever it's time. And my path is still by far not centered around just that specific deity worship, but it took over a decade to get it to the point of having that element at all. So if that hasn't happened yet for you, don't worry about it. It's your path, so it's all you. Sierra has now joined me on the bed, and I think it is time to end this week's video, so I will see you next week. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to be awesome, blessed be, and goodbye.